Good afternoon, 22nd of February 2023. You might be wondering who this is. I'm not really sure myself, but I thought that I would open with a picture because I know that people like visuals. Rather than just staring at a black box, you want to see something, and I understand that. This is a clip from the series called The Tudors. And it is called The Execution of Anne Askew. And right here, there is a warning, may be disturbing for some audiences. So I'm going to turn this off now. During this last week, I was looking to the old Puritan preachers for some encouragement. First, I began looking at John Flavel, F-A-L-V-E-L, who was a Puritan and a nonconformist. What a nonconformist was, as far as I understand, was a man or a woman who did not conform to the Church of England, which is pagan. It was and is still pagan. There was a Catholic Church, and then it became evangelical or Anglican, but really, it is all a mask for pagan heathenism. And at the bottom of this pagan heathenism is a lust for blood, because Satan is Antichrist. The blood of the Messiah does not count for Satan. If Satan is your God, you must shed blood. That's really, I think, in a nutshell, what it's all about. And while I was listening to some of the readings of John Flavel, my attention was brought to a man named Timothy Rogers, who evidently was a Puritan, who, that's my cat, he's crying, he does this it's a ritual every time he eats. Every time I give him something to eat, he cries for about a minute or two. And I've noticed particularly when I do videos, they want attention, so they start crying. So this Timothy Rogers, he was a man very prone to depression and melancholy, and I was listening to some of his readings. You can listen to them on YouTube. You just need to Google them. And through this Timothy Rogers, I was led to, my attention was brought to a man by the name of John Greenwood, who I'd never heard of before. And I began reading some of John Greenwood's writings on archive.org, archive.org. And if you just type in the writings of John Greenwood, you will find them, usually in conjunction with a man named Henry Barrow, B-A-R-R-O-W. Both of these men were hung for their beliefs after they had been in prison for 7 years. Actually, John Greenwood was put into prison for his beliefs, or better said, for his non-conforming to the pagan heathen religion of serpent worship. And Henry Barrow went to visit him, and Henry Barrow, upon his visit, was also incarcerated. Both men were in jail for 7 years. They had what they called close incarceration, which is being more or less put in a hole in the ground where you could not stand or lay down. And it must have been horrible. There were men, of course, who died in jail. These were Protestant men, so-called Protestant. This terminology is just so misleading. These men believed in the Bible literally, which the Catholic Church does not do. There are metaphors in the Bible, there are extended allegories, etc. But the Puritans believed in rightly dividing the word of truth. And the Catholics, their main, as far as I can ascertain, false doctrine is the transubstantiation of the host. This is all very occult language. We call it, in the evangelical church, communion. And the Catholics believe that this bread is the flesh of the Messiah and the blood is the blood of the Messiah, and you are eating his flesh and drinking his blood literally. And the Puritans said no. And this is what they were arrested for, more or less. Oftentimes at night, in bed at home, with their wife, taken out of bed, taken into custody, taken into the prison, and questioned relentlessly. The questioning was relentless, and it went on. And as you read these testimonies, I just couldn't help but think there's no use arguing with the devil, because it is a false law, it is a false belief, and they have no authority over you. But they do have guns and daggers and pistols and clubs, and they will bludgeon you to death. And that's what they want to do. But they want to give you the blame. They want you more or less to engage with them, and they will trip you up. And this is one comment that John Greenwood made. He said, "I see that you want to entangle me in your law." There's only one law, and the law is the Lord God Almighty. That's it. And mankind has made up lots of statutes and loopholes to those statutes, etc. And the same goes for this so-called church. The Catholic Church. Catholic means universal. It's universal pagan heathenism, which actually hides under its shadow Talmudic Judaism, which is Kabbalah, which is serpent worship. That's what it is. And John Greenwood said, you want to entangle me in your law. And when you read these testimonies, for one thing, often they are written in a very awkward English. You have to ask yourself, why didn't they just transliterate these interactions in modern English? And my feeling is, the impression is to be made that these were somehow stupid people who couldn't speak right because they couldn't write correctly. Probably back in the day, people just wrote phonetically. I don't know. But you can actually see the brilliance of these men of God comes through. They knew all about the false laws of the devil. There is no authority under this earth that can take you captive and torture you for your beliefs. And yet they do it by force. And there's one interesting, I've just been looking through, I should say, the Fox's Book of Martyrs. John Foxe, F-O-X-E. Now this is somewhat irritating to me, because if you read the Gospels, you'll understand that the Messiah called Herod, who was a Talmudic Jew and Edomite, a fox. So when you read this Fox's Book of Martyrs, you just have to ask yourself, you're asking yourself questions constantly, but let's just take it at face value. I wanted to show you this. There was a man named Sheterden, S-H-E-T-E-R-D-E-N. He was also taken from home. He was a priest in the church. And these priests realized there was some sort of a revival. And God was opening the eyes and the hearts and the minds of men and women, and showing them the truth and leading them away from this Catholic universal pagan heathenism. And at that time, by law, you had to go to church, and if people said, I don't want to go to church, you got in trouble, and they could arrest you, and they could torture you. And the means of torture, as I said, they would put you in jail, they would clap you in close. That was one of the idioms that I read. You would be clapped in close, which meant, as I already said, you would go and be put in a hole in the ground and shut in for days. God knows, it's just horrific. But this Sheterden is being grilled and being questioned. And they're questioned once, and they're questioned twice, and they're always being so-called given the chance to recant and to say, okay, I repudiate my beliefs so that you would live. But we do know that the Messiah said, if you love your life, you will lose it. If you lose your life for my sake, you will find it. I'm just looking out the window and I'm seeing the fog is going down again. We had real thick fog, and now they're putting more in. This is just absolutely crazy. So anyway, Sheterden says, they're talking about this communion, and they really stretch the point. It's craziness. You can read it on your own time. It's called Fox's Book of Martyrs. But Sheterden says, I am not so much bound to you to grant any such promise, and again, you shall well know that I would not promise to go across the street for you. But if I did at any time offend your law, let me have the punishment. I ask no favor. You see, they're always going back to the law. Which law have I offended? They did not offend any law. They believed in the truth. Now you're going to find some carnal people, carnal minds that will nowadays say these Puritans were right-wing, fundamentalist, radical extremists. That's about the worst you can ever be, is a right-wing, fundamentalist extremist. And all that means, translated into plain English, is that you believe the truth. Because in darkness, the light will not be tolerated. So, then the answer was, then said they, that was obstinacy in him, that he would not answer, and a token that his faith was not, seeing he was ashamed to utter it. You see, no matter how you answered these freaks, they would always put you down. They would always come back at you in a mocking way, because this is how the devil is. He's an accuser, he is a mocker, he is a deceiver, and he is a destroyer. Nay, said Sheterden, you shall well know I am not ashamed of my faith, but because you do so greedily seek blood, I will answer only to that you have against me. When I read this yesterday, I knew that it was the truth. They greedily seek blood. That's all they want. And they want you to fall into their traps, and me, and anyone who has the truth, so that they can legally kill you and make you shed your blood for their god, Satan. That's what it's about. And then the suffragan said, nay, you shall answer to the articles, or else be condemned upon suspicion. Nay, said Sheterden, You shall well know I am not ashamed of my faith, but because you do so greedily seek blood, I will answer only to that you have against me. Nay, you shall answer to the articles, or else be condemned upon suspicion. Can you imagine? Sheterden, I am content with that. Yet all men shall know that as ye suspect, and can prove no cause, so shall ye condemn me without a matter. And then shall all men know ye seek my blood, and not justice. This is literal. The devil wants your blood. This is the whole idea behind Antichrist. The blood of Christ is shed for us to cover a multitude of sins. And Satan and his minions say no. And Satan's minions shed blood for him. And in that, they go through a ritual of forgiving themselves of their own sins. It is perverted and it is wrong. And I will show you this passage here. Nay, said Sheterden, you shall know I am not ashamed of my faith, but because you do so greedily seek blood, I will answer only to that you have against me. Nay, you shall answer to the articles, or else be condemned upon suspicion. What does that mean? We're just going to kill you because we feel like it. And he recognized this and said it. I am content with that. Yet all men shall know that as ye suspect and can prove no cause, so shall ye condemn me without a matter. What does that mean? I'm being condemned for no reason other than what I believe. Thought crimes. And then shall all men know ye seek my blood and not justice. I'm going to turn it off now. The suffragan says, no, we seek not thy blood, but thy conversion. Isn't that kind of them? Was not this man an adult? Okay. I want to show this film now. It is very it is horrific. This is the murder of Anne Askew. Anne Askew was put to the rack. All of her tendons snapped, and she had to be carried to the stake and burned to death. Anne Askew was a Christian woman, a so-called Protestant. Here she is being carried to the stake after having been put to the rack twice. All of her bones are out of joint. All of her tendons are snapped. If you want the backstory, please look it up.
Just to let you know that Bishop Gardner would like to see you. Very soon.
This woman was also evidently a Protestant. I'm not sure if she was burned later or not, but she had the man put gunpowder around her neck so that she would blow up. This is the truth. And as dire as it is, you must know and understand what's happening in this world. It's never ending until the return of the Messiah. So, crass and heinous, egregious, unbelievable what mankind does to one another. But if you consider the fact that many men and women have been put to the stake and burned to death, with large congregations watching, you have to ask yourself, what happens to these men and women who witness such heinous acts, stand by, do nothing, and what happens to their progeny?